Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain was falling steadily over downtown New York, turning the streets into a mirror of blurred lights and silver reflections. Inside a small coffee shop that smelled of espresso and rain-soaked coats, Maya wiped the counter for what felt like the 100th time that night. She was the last barista on shift, tired, her apron stained with milk foam and the weight of overdue rent. The clock above the espresso machine blinked past midnight. Her phone lay beside the register, its cracked screen flickering from a dying battery. Just as she reached for it, another identical phone buzzed, same model, same pale pink case. Without thinking, she picked it up. "Hello," she said softly. A man's voice, urgent, professional, came through the line. "Mr. Parker, the board meeting at Aurora has been moved to 8 a.m. You will need to sign the final proposal before then. Check the file labeled Aurora Deck." Maya froze, confused. I think you have the wrong number." But the caller had already hung up. She turned the phone over and saw the differential cracked corner, no sticker of her favorite cartoon cat. Her heart skipped. Someone had left their phone behind. Outside, thunder rolled, and she glanced toward the door where a tall man in a dark coat stood beneath the awning, watching the rain. He looked lost, or maybe just deep in thought. The man lifted his wrist, checked his watch, and stepped back into the night. Maya's curiosity pulled her forward. She rushed out, calling, "Sir. You left your..." But he was already gone, swallowed by the rain and traffic. She looked down at the sleek phone in her hand. On the screen, a wallpaper of a skyline glittered above the name, Liam Parker. The name from the call. She had no idea she was holding the phone of a man whose decisions moved millions of dollars every day. To her, it was just a stranger's lost phone. She tucked it into her apron, whispering, "I will return it tomorrow," unaware that this tiny act of honesty would soon change the course of her life. The wind howled through the narrow street, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and something new, destiny waiting quietly just beyond the city's noise. The next morning, the city woke beneath a gray sky. Maya hurried along the slick sidewalks, clutching the stranger's phone wrapped in a napkin to keep it dry. The label on the lock screen still said Liam Parker. She looked him up online while waiting for the crosswalk light. His face appeared instantly: articles, awards, interviews. The words Aurora Labs and Tech Visionary filled her screen. She almost dropped the phone. The man who left it behind was not just some customer, he was one of the youngest millionaires in the city. Her heartbeat quickened as she approached the coffee shop's entrance, hoping he might return for it. But he did not. At noon, she gathered her courage and called the emergency contact saved as Claire's assistant. Within the hour, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tone arrived to collect it. Maya handed it over, expecting a simple thank you. Instead, Claire hesitated, her phone lighting up again. "Mr. Parker wants to see you," she said. Maya blinked, startled. "Me? Why?" "You answered his call last night." Apparently, that call saved him from missing a critical meeting. The next thing she knew, Maya was inside a black sedan gliding through the business district toward a glass tower that touched the clouds. Inside, the lobby was polished marble and quiet power. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, she found him by the window. Liam Parker. No coat this time. Tailored suit, sleeves rolled, eyes tired but intelligent. "You returned my phone," he said, turning toward her. His voice was deeper than she remembered. "And you also answered a call that could have cost me millions if missed." Maya fidgeted, her hands gripping the strap of her worn bag. "It was an accident. I did not mean to intrude." He studied her for a long moment before a small smile touched his lips. Maybe some accidents are worth keeping. He walked closer, placing the recovered phone on the table. I owe you a favor. Tell me what you need. Maya almost laughed. Honestly, rent money and a new phone would help. Liam chuckled softly, surprising her. I was thinking of something longer term. She frowned. Like what? He leaned on the table, his tone suddenly serious. A proposal. Not romantic, at least not yet. I need someone to act as my fiancé for a few months. My grandfather's estate requires that I be married to retain control of Aurora. The lawyers only care about appearances. You would be compensated generously. No strings beyond the contract. The words hung heavy between them. Maya stared at him, convinced she had misheard. You want me to pretend to be your wife? Exactly. Attend a few events, smile for the cameras, and help me keep what I built. In return, every debt you have disappears. Her breath caught. This was insane, absurd, impossible, and yet his eyes were steady, sincere. Why me? She asked quietly. Liam's answer came after a long pause. Because you were honest when you could have taken advantage. You did not sell my phone or leak the files inside. I trust that kind of integrity more than a polished smile from anyone in my world. Maya's stomach twisted with uncertainty. Outside, rain streaked the glass behind him like falling silver lines. He extended a contract folder toward her, the paper crisp and clean. Think about it, Maya. Sometimes the wrong call brings the right opportunity. She took the folder with trembling hands, the weight of it pressing against her chest as if it contained more than ink. Her mind raced. 2 months of pretending to be engaged to a billionaire. 2 months that could erase every struggle she had known. She left the office numb, unaware that her life had already crossed a line that no contract could undo. That night, Maya sat on her narrow bed in the tiny apartment, the sound of rain still whispering outside. The contract lay open on her lap. Every page looked unreal legal language, signatures, clauses about appearances and confidentiality. One line kept catching her eye, duration of agreement 2 months. Her reflection in the dark window looked small, lost between fear and temptation. She had spent her entire life trying to stay honest in a world that rewarded shortcuts, and now, for the first time, dishonesty offered her a way to breathe again. She thought of her mother's unpaid hospital bill, the eviction notice under her door, the empty fridge. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. If you decide yes, be at Aurora Tower at 10 a.m. She stared at it until the battery died. Sleep never came. At dawn, she stood in front of the mirror, pulled her hair into a low bun, and whispered, just 2 months. The elevator ride to the top floor of Aurora felt longer this time. When the doors opened, Liam was already waiting. No preamble, no small talk. He handed her a pen. Sign only if you are sure. She met his gaze. I am not sure, but I need this. The moment her signature touched the page, the sound of the city below seemed to fade. Liam slid the document into a folder, his expression unreadable. Welcome to the arrangement, Maya. He turned to Claire, his assistant. Get her fitted and briefed. First event is Friday. Claire raised an eyebrow but said nothing, only motioned for Maya to follow. The next 3 days moved like a blur. Designers and stylists swept through her world, measuring, pinning, teaching her how to walk in heels that felt like stilts. There were etiquette lessons, posture training, and a stack of magazines labeled Aurora Lifestyle. Through it all, Liam remained distant, professional, almost cold. When he did appear, it was only to review details. You will attend 5 events, he said, glancing at the calendar projected on his tablet. We will announce the engagement at the 2nd one. No personal involvement beyond the public image. Clear? Maya nodded, though her chest tightened at his tone. That night, she stood in front of a mirror surrounded by silk gowns and unfamiliar light. The girl staring back no longer looked like the one who served coffee for tips. She whispered to her reflection, "Who are you becoming?" Friday came faster than she expected. The gala ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and champagne laughter. When Liam entered, all eyes turned. He crossed the floor toward her, offering his arm like a practiced gentleman. "Ready?" he asked under his breath. "No," she whispered back, forcing a smile. "Good," he said softly. "That makes you believable." Cameras flashed as they stepped into the light. Reporters called out questions about how they met, when he proposed, what drew him to her. Maya repeated the story they had rehearsed: a chance meeting at a charity event, love at first sight, faith in destiny. Each lie tasted like sugar over stone, but as the night went on, something strange happened. When he laughed beside her quietly, genuinely, she forgot, for a moment, that it was pretend. Later, as the ballroom emptied and the music softened, he leaned closer and murmured, "You handled that perfectly." She smiled faintly. "You make lying sound like an art." He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing past the sequins and borrowed grace. "It is survival, not art," he said. The car ride back to the penthouse was silent except for the rain. When they stepped inside, she slipped off her heels and finally exhaled. "Good night, Mr. Parker," she said. "Liam," he corrected quietly. She paused at the doorway. "Good night, Liam." For the first time, he smiled without the armor of business. "Good night, Maya." And somewhere in that quiet, the contract began to feel less like a cage and more like a beginning. The following week unfolded like a movie Maya did not remember auditioning for. Every morning began with fittings and briefings, every evening ended with her learning how to exist in a world where forks had rules and smiles had strategy. Liam's mansion, perched high above the Hudson, became both her classroom and her prison. She learned how to greet investors, when to laugh, when to tilt her head so the cameras caught her best side. Claire drilled her on names and company ties, whispering like a coach before a match. Maya practiced the story of how she and Liam had met until it sounded almost real, even to her. But behind the rehearsed words and perfect posture, something unexpected began to shift. Liam was not the emotionless executive she had imagined. Between meetings, he would stop by the kitchen to grab black coffee, rolling his sleeves up, revealing ink on his wrist coordinates, she guessed. Sometimes she found him staring out over the skyline, silent, his face softer than his headlines suggested. One night, after a long rehearsal for an upcoming foundation dinner, she caught him sitting alone in the music room, an untouched glass of scotch beside the piano. "You play?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Not anymore." She smiled gently. "That is a shame. The piano looks lonely." He gestured to the bench. "Then sit. Give it company." Her fingers trembled over the keys, rusty from childhood lessons. The first notes were uneven, but soon the melody steadied. Liam leaned back, eyes half closed, listening. When she finished, the silence that followed was softer, warmer. "You do not belong in that apron you wore at the cafe," he said quietly. "You belong in rooms like this." She shook her head, laughing under her breath. "Rooms like this do not belong to people like me." "Maybe they should," he replied. After that, the rehearsals felt less mechanical. He corrected her posture with a light touch, teased her about her clumsy heels, listened when she talked about her sketches. Once, she found one of her drawings pinned on his office board, a rough sketch of the city skyline she had left in the kitchen. When she asked why, he simply said, "It reminds me to look up." The next big event came sooner than expected, a corporate gala filled with shareholders and press. The air shimmered with ambition. As they arrived, flashes exploded. Liam slipped his hand around her waist, steady but respectful. "Just breathe," he whispered. "Pretend you belong here." "Pretend," she said softly. "You make it sound easy." It will be, he promised. The evening tested every lesson she had learned. When a reporter asked what she admired most about Liam, she smiled and answered, his patience. The crowd laughed, charmed by her sincerity. Later, as the orchestra played, he leaned close, his voice low enough for her alone. You are getting good at this. She met his gaze. Maybe too good. For a heartbeat, the world around them blurred. No cameras, no deal, just two people who had forgotten where fiction ended. Then Claire appeared, reminding Liam about a speech. The spell broke. Maya stepped aside, her heart unsteady. Watching him command the room, confident and untouchable, she realized that pretending to be his fiancé had begun to feel dangerously real. When the event ended, and they stood in the quiet lobby waiting for their car, he turned to her. You were extraordinary tonight. She smiled faintly. That is what you paid for. He looked as if he wanted to say something more but stopped. The car arrived. The ride home was silent again, but this time, the silence carried questions neither of them dared to ask. Outside the window, the city lights blurred like a painting in motion, and Maya could not tell anymore whether the life she was living was borrowed or becoming her own. By the time the second month began, Maya had become a fixture in Liam's world. Every magazine called her the mystery fiancée, every headline used the word fairy tale. Yet beneath the glittering surface, she still woke up wondering if she was playing a part or living one. The next event on their calendar was the Aurora Foundation Charity Gala, the largest of the year. It was where they would publicly announce their engagement. The thought made her stomach twist. Liam was calm as always, reviewing speeches in the car while she tried to steady her breathing. When they arrived, the ballroom looked like a dream. Crystal chandeliers, a string quartet, hundreds of guests dressed like royalty. Cameras flashed the moment they entered. Liam took her hand and whispered, just smile and follow my lead. For a while, everything went smoothly. They greeted donors, exchanged polite words, and took photographs in front of the Aurora backdrop. Then, during an interview for a live broadcast, a reporter leaned in with a sly grin and asked, So, Miss Bennett, how did you and Mr. Parker meet? Rumor says it was not exactly love at first sight. Maya froze for a second, then remembered the script they had practiced. But instead of repeating it, something inside her rebelled. She took a deep breath and said, Actually, it started with a wrong call. I answered a phone that was not mine, and somehow, it led me here. The audience laughed softly, touched by the simplicity of her honesty. The reporter smiled. Sounds like fate. Liam glanced at her, surprised but not angry. When the interview ended, he whispered, That was not what we rehearsed. She smiled faintly. No, but it was the truth. The rest of the evening unfolded like a blur of music and conversation. During the dinner, Liam watched her laugh with guests, her nervousness replaced by quiet confidence. He realized she belonged in that room more than most of the people who had been born to it. When it was time for his speech, he spoke about integrity and second chances, his eyes finding hers across the crowd. Sometimes life gives you a moment that tests who you are, he said. If you meet it with honesty, it might just give you more than you expect. After the applause, they shared a dance. The lights dimmed, and the orchestra played a slow melody. You handled yourself perfectly, he said softly. You mean I survived? No, he said, I mean you shined. The warmth in his voice made her heart stutter. For a second, she forgot about contracts and deadlines. When the music ended, they remained close, suspended in a silence that said too much. Later, outside the venue, photographers shouted for one more picture. Liam stepped forward, placing his arm gently around her shoulders, and smiled for the cameras. But as the flashes burst, Maya felt something real beneath the act of protective warmth, a steady heartbeat that did not belong to pretense. On the ride home, neither of them spoke. The city outside glittered like liquid gold, and their reflections merged in the car window. When they reached the mansion, Maya turned to him. About what I said tonight, she began, but he interrupted quietly, it was perfect. She looked at him, uncertain. Even if it was off script? Especially because it was, he said. They stood in the foyer, the air between them thick with something unnamed. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. You are doing better than either of us expected. She met his eyes. So are you. For a long moment, they just stood there, the contract forgotten, two people who were supposed to be pretending but were no longer sure where the pretending ended. Upstairs, the city lights flickered through the tall windows, and somewhere deep inside, Maya felt the first fragile pull of something that might be love. Days turned into weeks, and the line between fiction and reality blurred completely. The contract still existed, signed and sealed in a drawer somewhere, but neither of them seemed to care anymore. Liam began inviting Maya to small dinners at home instead of formal events, cooking pasta himself while jazz music played in the background. He had started to laugh more often, to talk about things that had nothing to do with money or meetings. One evening, as rain tapped against the glass walls of the penthouse, he asked her a question out of nowhere. Do you ever wonder what your life would look like if you had never picked up that phone? She smiled softly. Probably quieter. Probably poorer. But also emptier. He nodded, looking down at the glass of wine in his hand. Mine too. The simplicity of his answer lingered in the air, heavy and warm. She realized she was no longer afraid of him. He was still powerful, still composed, but beneath it all, he was human, lonely in a way she understood. That night, after dinner, they stood by the balcony watching the city lights pulse like stars. Do you ever get tired of pretending? She asked. Liam turned toward her, his voice low. Every day. But not when I am with you. The words startled her more than she wanted to admit. Their eyes met, the distance between them shrinking until it felt dangerous to breathe. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the moment. It is the board, he muttered, stepping away. She exhaled slowly, the spell broken but not forgotten. The next morning, the house felt different. Warmer. The staff greeted her with small smiles. Even Claire, always sharp and efficient, softened a little. Maya began sketching again, using the sunlight that filtered through the tall windows. One afternoon, she left her sketchbook open on the table, unaware that Liam would later find it. When she returned that night, he was standing by it, tracing the lines of her drawings with his fingertips. These are incredible, he said quietly. You should be showing them, not hiding them. She shrugged, embarrassed. They are just sketches. No, he said firmly. They are pieces of you. The sincerity in his tone made her chest ache. A few days later, he surprised her with a private tour of an art gallery. Consider this practice for your own show, he said, and for a fleeting moment she imagined what it would be like if this were real, if they were real. As the evening light faded, they found themselves alone in one of the gallery rooms surrounded by abstract paintings. The silence between them hummed like electricity. I used to come here when I needed to think, he said. Before everything became about numbers and shareholders. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. What do you think about now? His gaze met hers. You. The word hung in the air like a confession. He stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. It was not a kiss, not yet, but it was enough to make her heart race. Liam, she said softly, this is not part of the deal. Then maybe it is time to rewrite the deal, he replied. They stood there until the gallery lights dimmed, the city outside glowing through the tall glass. Later, in the car ride home, neither spoke. But when he walked her to her room, he hesitated at the door, as if fighting a war between reason and desire. Finally, he said, Good night, Maya. She looked up at him, eyes wide, voice trembling. Good night, Liam. He lingered a second longer, then turned away. When the door clicked shut, she leaned against it, her heartbeat wild and confused. The fake engagement was beginning to feel dangerously close to the truth, and for the first time, she was not sure she wanted to stop it. It happened on a bright Monday morning when everything seemed too perfect to be real. Maya woke to sunlight spilling through the tall windows, the smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. Liam had left early for a meeting, leaving her a handwritten note on the counter that read, "Dinner tonight. Just us." She smiled, tracing the words with her fingertip, her heart lighter than it had been in years. But by noon, everything shattered. Claire appeared at the penthouse with a tight expression and a tablet in her hand. "You need to see this," she said. On the screen were headlines flashing across every major news outlet, Aurora CEO's fake engagement exposed. Beneath it, photos of Maya in her old cafe uniform, videos of her walking to work, comments flooding Ingle Digger, fraud, actress for hire. Maya's knees almost gave out. "Who did this?" she whispered. Claire's jaw clenched. "Someone leaked the contract. It was sent anonymously to several reporters. The board is demanding a statement." Maya could barely breathe. "And Liam? He is in an emergency meeting trying to contain it." The phone rang before she could respond. Liam's voice came through, low and urgent. "Maya, do not go outside. Stay in the apartment until this is over." She wanted to believe him, but his tone carried something cold, something guarded. "Did you tell them?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Of course not," he said, but there was hesitation, a pause too long to ignore. That single breath of silence broke something inside her. "You promised no one would get hurt," she said, tears stinging her eyes. "I am sorry, Maya." "I will fix this," he said quickly, but she could hear the chaos behind him, the voices, the pressure, the world closing in. When the call ended, she packed her bag with shaking hands. She could not stay there, not under the same roof where truth had been sold like a story. She left the penthouse through the back entrance, past the cameras flashing outside the main door. Rain began to fall again, light but relentless, like the night she first picked up that phone. By the time Liam returned home hours later, the apartment was silent. On the counter lay her ring and a note, written in the same handwriting he had used that morning. It said only 3 words: "It was real." He read it again and again, his chest tightening with something close to regret and something worse, fear that he had lost the only real thing in his carefully constructed life. Outside, the city roared with scandal, and for the first time in years, Liam Parker felt powerless. The deal that had once been about saving his company had just cost him the one person who made it worth saving. For days, the story dominated every headline. Reporters camped outside Aurora Tower, shouting questions Liam never answered. Stocks wavered, board members demanded explanations, and social media turned Maya's name into a spectacle. He barely slept, surviving on black coffee and adrenaline, fighting to hold together the empire he had built. Yet beneath the chaos, one thought consumed him: Maya was gone. When he found her apartment empty and her phone disconnected, the reality hit harder than any headline. For the first time, silence filled his life, not the kind money could fix, but the kind that broke through his armor. On the 3rd day, he called an emergency press conference. Cameras filled the lobby, flashes bursting like lightning. He stepped to the podium, tie loosened, voice steady but raw. "There have been rumors about my engagement to Maya Bennett," he began. "Some of them are true. The relationship began as a contract, a mistake born out of fear and pride. But what no one seems to understand is that somewhere along the way, it stopped being an act." The room murmured, reporters scribbling furiously. He continued, his voice softening. "Maya Bennett reminded me what honesty looks like. She walked into my life because of a wrong call, and she walked out because I was too afraid to tell her that I loved her. I am done hiding. Aurora Labs will survive or fall on the truth, not deception." The broadcast spread across every major network within the hour. People who had once mocked him now watched in stunned silence. Across town, in a quiet art studio where she had taken refuge, Maya saw his face on a small television above the counter. His voice cracked as he said, "Maya, if you are watching this, you do not owe me anything. But I hope you know that you were never part of a deal. You were the only real thing in my life." Her hands shook, the paintbrush falling from her grip. Tears blurred her vision as the camera cut to him leaving the podium, ignoring the reporters shouting his name. That evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline, Maya stood outside the same glass tower where it all began. The security guard recognized her instantly and opened the door without a word. Inside, the building was quiet, the chaos of the day settling into a fragile calm. She found him in the boardroom, jacket off, sleeves rolled, staring out at the city. When he turned and saw her, he froze as if afraid she was just another illusion. "You should not be here," he said softly. "Maybe not," she replied, her voice steady. "But I came to say that you were right. Some accidents are worth keeping." His eyes softened, disbelief melting into something deeper. He crossed the room slowly, as if one wrong move might break the moment. "Does that mean you forgive me?" he asked. Maya looked at him, her eyes still wet but calm. "It means I believe you." The distance between them disappeared. In the quiet that followed, the past few months rewrote themselves not as a contract, but as a love story that had finally stopped pretending. 3 months later, the headlines had changed. The scandal that once filled every screen was replaced by something quieter, something genuine. Aurora Labs announced a new initiative called City Voices, a foundation supporting young artists from struggling communities. At the center of it stood Maya Bennett, no longer introduced as a mystery fiancé but as the creative director of the program. The first exhibition opened on a bright spring afternoon in a converted warehouse near the Hudson River. The walls were lined with artwork from dozens of local talents, but one corner drew everyone's attention: a collection titled The Wrong Call. It featured sketches from Maya's own notebook, framed beside a photograph of a cracked pink phone. The description read, "Sometimes the wrong connection leads you to the right person." As guests moved through the gallery, cameras captured the warmth, not the drama. Then, through the crowd, Liam appeared. He had kept his distance for weeks, giving her space to rebuild her name without his shadow. But today, he was just a man in a dark suit, holding a small box in his hand. When their eyes met, the noise of the room seemed to fade. He walked toward her slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You once told me you wanted your art to hang in a place that mattered. I wanted to make sure it started here." She smiled, tears glistening. "You did not have to do this." "I did," he said. "Because this time, it is not about contracts or appearances. It is about truth." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring engraved with 2 small words: "Wrong Call." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but he ignored them, keeping his eyes only on her. No deals. No terms. Just vows. "Will you marry me, for real this time?" For a heartbeat, Maya said nothing. Then she nodded, her voice trembling but sure. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Applause filled the room, soft but sincere, like the sound of rain returning after a long silence. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she whispered, "The best wrong call of our lives." He laughed quietly, his forehead resting against hers. "And the only one I will never regret." Later, as the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, they stood together before her artwork, hand in hand. The city glowed beyond the glass, alive and forgiving. In the reflection, they looked nothing like the tabloid couple they once were, just 2 people who had found each other in the chaos and decided to stay. The voiceover of the gallery's closing announcement echoed softly through the hall, "Thank you for visiting City Voices, where every story matters." Maya leaned her head against Liam's shoulder, her heart steady for the first time in years. Some stories begin with mistakes, she thought. The lucky ones end with them, too, because sometimes, destiny just needs one wrong call to get it right.